There is a Meir of the Alter Rebbe in this week's Parsha SEITZEI, printed in the Likkutei Torah, which begins with the words "V'lo ava havai Elokecha lishmo el bilom." And in this particular Meir, the Alter Rebbe sets out an absolute template of creation, more than a paradigm. A paradigm is just the general form which is repeated, but a template has exactitude. Let me spell it out for you. The Alter Rebbe says that the template consists of, or is symbolized within, the four letters of God's name: a Yud, and a Hey, and a Vav, and the Hey, otherwise referred to as the Tetragrammaton. Now, those four letters provide us with an insight of four stages of creation. But at the same time, since the human being, Adam, was created in the image of God, therefore within our own being, that same template operates, and we should be able to identify those four stages within our consciousness, also symbolized within the letters Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, which is the name of God's essence. It goes like this: attributing to Hashem anthropomorphic qualities, human-like being, we say that Hashem wanted to create a world. But the brightness and the essence of godliness was so overpowering that only the tiniest aperture was to be formed to let the merest spark of the blaze of creation to be able to filter through. And that aperture is the beginning of the formation of the letter Yud, which begins with a thorn which is the upper point where we begin drawing the tiny Yud. And that represents the tiny aperture that allows the flow of energy into creation. And the letter Yud, which is the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet, indicates also that the amount of energy that Hashem displayed to create the world was infinitesimally small. The next stage was to take that energy and allow it to become expressed in spiritual worlds. The letter Hey, which is the second letter of the four letters Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, already has dimension. It's got breadth and width. It indicates a spiritual world that has come into being. From that infinitesimally small degree of energy, a whole range of spiritual worlds become into existence. And then, in order to pursue the intention of creation, which isn't a spiritual world, the intention of creation is a finite physical world that you and I inhabit consciously. The letter Vav, which literally means a hook, but it's drawn downwards. It draws down the spiritual energy into the lowest form. And that process of drawing it down, the letter Vav symbolizes. And the ultimate outcome is another letter Hey, the final letter Hey, which means once again a rebuilding of worlds, but this time a finite physical world. So we have a process of creation in 4 steps, actually 5, if we count the very first aperture, the okuts, the tiny point that begins the construction of the letter Yud. You have the beginning of the flow, the tiny degree of it required for creation, the expansion of that, the letter Hey, in terms of spiritual worlds, a condensation, what we call a tzimtzum, allowing for histalshelus, which is a causal effect relationship, creating a world. And then from that spiritual world, it had to be drawn down into even the lowest form, which became again a letter Hey, another world, the finite physical world. These processes are also replicated in the template of a human being. In what way? The creation of consciousness. How do you become conscious? How do you draw from subconsciousness into consciousness? Where did that thought arise from that you happen to be thinking? It began as a mere flash of illumination, an an idea without shape, a mere spark. And that spark, which is represented in the letter Yud, becomes developed, formed, becomes mentally articulated, length and breadth. And what is that? That means analysis, understanding. So these two, the first Yud and the first Hey, form the Chochmah and Bina process of consciousness. The beginning of consciousness, a mere spark, comes from seemingly nowhere. An idea begins to pop into the head. And then the evolution of it, the development of it, by analyzing it, thinking about it, contemplating it, an expansion of that spark. But then a further process takes place. And that process is that if that understanding needs to be communicated, if that understanding needs to find the light of day in the world, it has to be drawn down from inner understanding into something more tangible. And that process of drawing it down through da'at, focusing, because da'at flowing from bina contains within it emotions, the other seven sfirot, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, etc., which are the basis of our emotional makeup. Emotions are needed for us to cross the boundary of keeping something within and expressing it without. I won't open my mouth and speak unless I have some emotional energy that charges me to express dibur, speech, or activity. That's the last letter Hey. The last letter Hey means it becomes tangible once again, but physically so, audibly so, or the hand moves. So as you can see, we have a template that describes creation, at the same time the human being, and that template governs the nature of the world. That's the basis of this Meir in SEITZEI.